I turned the key to my bedroom door, my mind still buzzing from the family reunion downstairs. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses faded as I stepped inside, loosening my tie. Something felt off. I glanced at my closet where my safe was hidden behind hanging clothes. The door was slightly ajar. My heart pounded as I rushed over and pulled it open. Empty. $75,000 in savings gone. Not a single bill remained. This was not a break-in. Someone in my family had done this. I raced downstairs, my legs shaking. Before I tell you about my father's response and how I stood up for myself, drop a comment, letting me know where you are watching from, and hit subscribe so you do not miss what happens next in this story. Growing up as the eldest son in the Sullivan family, I always thought I had a good relationship with my parents and younger brother. After graduating from college 4 years ago at 24, I moved back home to save money while starting my career. My parents, Michael and Diana Sullivan, seemed supportive of this decision, telling me I could stay as long as I needed to get on my feet. My younger brother, Jake, 4 years my junior, was always the golden child in our family. He got better birthday presents, more attention, and endless praise for average accomplishments. I never let it bother me much, figuring that was just how family dynamics worked sometimes. I found a job at a local tech company right out of college. The pay was not great for someone with my qualifications, but I was determined to make it work. Every month I put aside a significant portion of my paycheck into savings. My dream was simple but important to me: save enough for a down payment on a small house, and finally achieve complete independence. After 4 years of diligent saving, working overtime, and even picking up freelance projects on weekends, I had accumulated $75,000. I kept it in a small safe in my bedroom closet, not because I did not trust banks, but because watching that physical pile grow gave me motivation. The annual Sullivan family reunion always brought relatives from across the country to our suburban home in Michigan. This year was no different, with about 30 family members crowding our house on a warm Saturday in June. Throughout the day, I noticed something strange. My parents kept making odd comments about responsibility and contribution whenever I was within earshot. During lunch, my father raised his glass in a toast. "To family and everyone pulling their weight," he said, staring directly at me. Several relatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others nodded in agreement, though they clearly did not understand the context. Later, I caught my parents and Jake huddled in a corner of the kitchen, whispering intently. They immediately stopped talking when I approached, and exchanged knowing glances. Jake could barely look me in the eye. My Aunt Sarah made things even more confusing when she pulled me aside near the dessert table. "Your parents told me Jake got into Stanford. The tuition must be astronomical." They seemed very relieved about something financial, though. I shrugged it off, figuring they must have received some kind of scholarship news. Little did I know what was really happening. As the reunion continued into the evening, the strange behavior from my immediate family persisted. My mother kept introducing me to relatives as her son, who still lives at home, emphasizing those last 3 words each time. My father spoke loudly about how expensive housing had become while looking pointedly in my direction. Jake was unusually quiet, disappearing for long stretches of time. My cousin Thomas, who had always been straight with me, pulled me aside during the backyard barbecue. "Is everything okay with you and your folks? There is some weird tension I am picking up." I assured him everything was fine, but his question planted a seed of doubt in my mind. Something was definitely off, but I could not put my finger on what exactly. The unease followed me throughout the evening, a shadow I could not shake. When guests finally began to leave around 10, I helped clean up before heading to my room to change into more comfortable clothes. That was when I discovered my empty safe, and my world came crashing down around me. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my empty wallet clutched in my hand like evidence at a crime scene. The remaining relatives were saying their goodbyes in the foyer, but I pushed past them toward the kitchen where I could hear my immediate family talking in hushed tones. "What happened to my money?" I demanded, my voice shaking more than I wanted it to. My father turned slowly, a strange smile spreading across his face. The kitchen fell silent as my mother and Jake froze by the sink. "We need to talk about your living situation, Bennett," my father said calmly, as if we were discussing the weather, and not the theft of my life savings. My living situation. I want to know where my $75,000 went. My father crossed his arms. We had a family meeting and took a vote. You are 28 years old, Bennett. You cannot live here for free anymore. The words hit me like a physical blow. A vote about my money. Who exactly voted your mother? Jake and I, my father, replied his tone. Matter of fact, 3 against 0. Democracy in action. My mother stepped forward, drying her hands on a dishcloth. Bennett, honey, we used it for Jake's tuition. He got into Stanford, and we need to secure his spot with the first semester payment. You stole my money for Jake's college. I could barely get the words out. We did not steal anything, my father countered, his voice hardening. Consider it back rent for the last 4 years. We have been subsidizing your adult life while you hoarded money in that safe. Jake finally spoke up, though he still could not meet my eyes. Come on, Ben. Family helps family. You would not want me to miss this opportunity, right? Stanford is my dream school. I looked from one family member to another, searching for any sign of remorse or understanding. There was none. How did you even get into my safe? I asked. My mother had the decency to look slightly ashamed. We have a spare key to your room. We found the safe key in your desk drawer while you were at work yesterday. You went through my personal belongings. That is breaking and entering. That is theft. My father laughed dismissively. Do not be so dramatic. Parents cannot break into their own house. And again, consider it payment for services rendered. From now on, if you want to continue living here, you will pay $800 a month in rent. My mother nodded in agreement. It is more than fair, Bennett. That is below market rate for this area. Jake took a step toward me. Ben, you should be happy to help your brother. That is what family does. You owe us for raising you. That was the breaking point. I owe you. I worked nights and weekends for 4 years, saving that money. I skipped vacations, declined nights out with friends, ate ramen 3 times a week. Also, I could finally move out and have my own place. And you think I owe you? We fed you, clothed you, and put a roof over your head for 28 years, my father countered. It is time you contributed instead of just taking. The remaining relatives who had overheard the commotion were quickly ushered out by my mother, who smiled brightly and claimed this was just a little family discussion. But there was nothing little about it. In one fell swoop, my family had betrayed my trust and stolen my future. That night was the longest of my life. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of my family moving around downstairs. They were celebrating. I could hear the pop of a champagne bottle and Jake's excited voice talking about Stanford's campus and the opportunities waiting for him there. Opportunities paid for with my stolen money. Sleep was impossible as my mind cycled through shock, disbelief, and then a burning anger that settled into my chest. How could they justify stealing from their own son? How could they frame it as if I was the one taking advantage of them? 4 years of hard work and sacrifice gone in an instant because they felt entitled to my money. Around midnight, I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. Someone paused outside my door, and I tensed, ready for another confrontation. But after a moment, they continued down the hall. It was probably Jake, too cowardly to face me after what happened. I grabbed my laptop and started researching. First, I looked up theft laws in our state. What my parents did was unquestionably illegal. Taking property without permission, even from a family member living in your house, constituted theft. The value made it grand theft, a felony. Next, I checked my bank accounts to assess my financial situation. I had about $3,000 in my checking account that they did not know about. Not nearly enough for a down payment, but enough to get me started somewhere new. By morning, my hurt had crystallized into resolve. I would not let them get away with this. I got dressed for work as usual, but instead of heading to the office, I called in sick. Then I drove to see my friend Alex, who had graduated law school last year and was working at a small firm downtown. They did what Alex exclaimed after I explained the situation. Bennett, that is straight up theft, family or not. I know, I replied, but they do not see it that way. They think they are entitled to my money because I live under their roof. Alex shook his head. That is not how it works. You have rights. Do you have any proof the money existed And that it was yours. I nodded. Bank withdrawal records showing I took out cash over time. I also have the receipt for the safe which is registered in my name. And I can prove I earned that money through my pay stubs. Good, Alex said. Here is what we will do. First, I will draft a formal letter demanding return of the funds. If they refuse, we can file a police report and potentially pursue civil action. The thought of taking legal action against my own parents made my stomach churn, but what choice did I have? They had left me no alternatives. After meeting with Alex, I drove to a few apartment complexes to inquire about immediate availability. The rental market was tight, but I found a small studio apartment about 20 minutes from work that I could move into next week. It would drain most of my remaining funds, but I needed to get out of that house. Next, I called my boss and explained that I needed extra hours. I was vague about the family emergency, but made it clear I was available for overtime, weekend, work, anything. To my relief, he was understanding, and mentioned a special project coming up that would include overtime pay. By the time I returned home that evening, I had a plan in place. I would gather all my important documents and valuables, secure a new place to live, and then confront my family with legal consequences if they did not return my money. I was not going to roll over and accept their betrayal. When I walked through the front door, the house was quiet. I found my parents and Jake sitting in the living room, acting as if nothing had happened. My father was reading the newspaper. My mother was knitting. Jake was on his laptop, probably researching Stanford dorms. Bennett, my mother said with a smile that did not reach her eyes. Did you think about our conversation? $800 a month is very reasonable rent. My father lowered his newspaper. And we will need the first and last month's rent by next Friday. I stood in the doorway looking at these people who I had trusted implicitly my entire life, who had raised me, who were supposed to love and support me. In that moment, they felt like complete strangers. Jake finally looked up from his computer. I got my housing assignment today. The dorms at Stanford look amazing. Something inside me snapped. I turned and walked upstairs without saying a word, ignoring their calls behind me. I had nothing to say to them tonight. Tomorrow would be soon enough for them to understand the consequences of their actions. That night, I carefully gathered my birth certificate, social security card, passport, and other important documents. I packed a suitcase with essential clothing and placed my laptop and other valuables in my car. I was ready to make my move, but first there would be one final family dinner. The next evening, tension hung in the air like a thick fog as we sat around the dining table. My mother had prepared my favorite meal, lasagna, with garlic bread, an obvious attempt at manipulation. No one spoke for the first few minutes, the only sound the scraping of forks against plates. Finally, my father cleared his throat and placed a piece of paper on the table, sliding it toward me. This is our new arrangement. $800 a month, utilities included. You will have the same room, kitchen privileges, and laundry access. We think it is more than fair. I glanced at the paper without touching it. It was a crude rental agreement, clearly downloaded from the internet and filled in by hand. At the bottom was a line for my signature. We expect the first payment tomorrow, my mother added. You can do a bank transfer or write a check. Jake kept his eyes on his plate but chimed in. It is really not a big deal, Ben. Everyone pays rent. I set down my fork carefully and looked at each of them. My mother, who had once kissed my scraped knees and told me I could be anything I wanted to be. My father, who had taught me to ride a bike and said he was proud of me when I graduated. Jake, who I had helped with homework and defended from neighborhood bullies. With deliberate calm, I stood up. Then you will not mind what happens next. My father's smile faltered. What is that supposed to mean? Without another word, I walked out of the dining room, grabbed my jacket from the coat rack, and left the house. Their voices called after me, confusion, and the first hints of worry evident in their tones. But I did not look back. I drove straight to Alex's apartment, where he had offered me his couch until my studio was ready. The weight that had been crushing my chest since discovering the empty safe seemed slightly lighter. I was taking back control. The next morning, Alex filed the official letter demanding return of my $75,000 plus interest within 72 hours. I went to the local police station and filed a report for theft, providing all my documentation and evidence. By noon, my phone was buzzing constantly with calls and messages from my family. I ignored them all. Let them worry. Let them feel a fraction of the anxiety and betrayal I had experienced. That afternoon, I received an unexpected call from my Aunt Sarah. "Bennett, what is going on? Your mother called me crying about some money and you moving out." I explained the situation, not holding back any details. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I had no idea. She finally said, her voice tight with anger. "That is not right what they did to you. Not right at all." Word spread quickly through the extended family. By evening, several relatives had called to express their support for me. Many were horrified by my parents' actions and offered help with my moving expenses or temporary housing. My cousin Thomas even drove 2 hours to bring me some home-cooked meals and additional clothing I had left behind. "Your dad always was a bit controlling with money," he said as we unloaded his car. "But this crosses every line. The family is pretty divided right now." 3 days passed with no formal response to the legal letter. My phone continued to buzz with their calls, but I maintained my silence. On the 4th day, as I was setting up my new studio apartment, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Jake standing there looking miserable. "How did you find me?" I asked, not inviting him in. "Thomas told me," he admitted. "Look, everything has gone crazy at home. The police came yesterday and questioned Mom and Dad for hours. They are freaking out. Dad keeps saying they did nothing wrong, but Mom is scared about legal consequences." "And what about you?" I asked. Still excited about Stanford, Jake looked down. I withdrew my acceptance. "I cannot go there knowing how the tuition was paid for. Ben, I am really sorry. I should have stood up to them when they first suggested taking your money." His apology meant little to me at that point. "You should go, Jake. This is not going to be resolved with a simple sorry." As he turned to leave, he paused. "They got a letter from your lawyer today. They are meeting tomorrow to discuss it." The next day, I received a call from Alex. My parents had contacted the law firm and requested a meeting. They were willing to negotiate the return of my funds. We scheduled a meeting for the following afternoon at his office. Seeing my family walk into the conference room was surreal. My father looked smaller somehow, the confident swagger gone from his step. My mother had been crying, her eyes red and puffy. Jake hung back, clearly uncomfortable being there. "Before we begin," my father started, his voice lacking its usual authority, "we want to say we never meant to hurt you, Bennett." Alex cut him off. "This meeting is to discuss the return of my client's funds, not to make excuses for criminal behavior." My mother burst into tears. "We never thought of it as stealing. You are our son. We just thought." "You thought my money was your money," I finished for her. "You thought the years I spent saving, working overtime, giving up social events meant nothing because I lived under your roof." My father looked down at the table. "We were wrong. We see that now." The meeting was brief and to the point. My parents agreed to return the full $75,000 plus 5% interest within 1 week. They would provide a written apology acknowledging their actions, and in return I would not pursue criminal charges. Jake would apply to state schools that the family could actually afford. As we all stood to leave, my mother reached for my arm. "Will you come home now? We can work this out as a family." I gently removed her hand. "That is not my home anymore. I need space and time to decide what kind of relationship, if any, I want to have with you all going forward." The devastation on her face almost made me waver, but then I remembered the empty safe and their smug justifications. Some wounds would take a very long time to heal if they ever could. 6 months passed in my new life. My studio apartment, though small, became a sanctuary of independence. I decorated it simply but comfortably, taking pride in every piece of furniture I purchased with my own money. My $75,000 had been returned as promised, and I immediately deposited it in a secure bank account that only I had access to. At work, my dedication to extra projects paid off. I received a promotion and a 15% salary increase, which made my financial situation much more stable. I even started dating again, meeting Amanda, a graphic designer who worked in the same building. She was creative, independent, and had no interest in playing family power games. I maintained minimal contact with my parents and Jake. Occasional text messages, brief phone calls on holidays, nothing more. They respected my boundaries, perhaps, understanding for the first time that respect was the foundation they had broken. My Aunt Sarah became an unexpected source of support, inviting me to Sunday dinners and including me in family events where I would feel comfortable. Thomas and I grew closer as well, our friendship strengthening beyond the bonds of extended family. In therapy, which I started a month after moving out, I worked through the complex emotions of betrayal, anger, and loss. My therapist helped me understand that while forgiveness might eventually be possible, trust would need to be rebuilt slowly, if at all. Families make mistakes, she told me during one session, sometimes terrible ones. Your journey now is deciding what kind of relationship you want going forward, without expectations based on the past. Around the 7-month mark, I received an email from Jake. He had enrolled at the local state university and had taken a part-time job to help pay his expenses. "I do not want to be the person who takes from others anymore," he wrote. "You taught me that even though it was a hard lesson for all of us." Shortly after, my parents reached out and asked if I would meet them for coffee. After some consideration, I agreed. We met at a neutral location, a cafe downtown that none of us had been to before. "You look well," my mother said as I sat down. There was a genuine warmth in her voice, but also caution. She knew things were different now. "The apartment is working out great," I replied. "And work is good too." My father, who had always dominated conversations, was notably quiet. Finally he spoke. "We have been doing some counseling as a couple, and as a family with Jake. We have realized some patterns that were unhealthy." I nodded but said nothing, waiting for him to continue. "I always thought providing financially was what made me a good father," he continued. "I never considered that respect and boundaries were just as important, if not more so." "We miss you," my mother added, "but we understand why you needed to create distance." The conversation was awkward but civil. There were no dramatic reconciliations or tearful embraces, just 3 adults trying to navigate a new reality. Before we parted, I agreed to join them for dinner the following month, a small step toward whatever our relationship would become. As I walked back to my car that day, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The pain of betrayal had not disappeared, but its sharp edges had softened. I had discovered strength. I did not know I possessed and built a life that truly belonged to me. The most important lesson I learned was that love without respect is not really love at all. Family bonds are precious, but they cannot come at the expense of your dignity and autonomy. Sometimes you have to lose the family you thought you had to find the strength to create the life you deserve. And sometimes in that process, your family might learn and grow too, opening the door to a new relationship built on mutual respect rather than obligation or control. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? What did you learn from that experience? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to support the channel, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself is not selfish, it is necessary. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, the family you create through mutual respect and love can be stronger than the family you were born into.